He stood in my kitchen like he already owned it, arms crossed, voice sharp. "You'll die here, not live here," he said, as if I was already buried. The same boy I taught to tie his shoes, who once begged me not to leave him at preschool, now looked at me like I was a problem to solve. I didn't yell, I didn't beg, I just nodded, and quietly started the paperwork to sell the house from under him. Wait, before we go any further, I gotta ask, where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe. The Arizona heat clung to the windows like a second skin, baking every inch of Clara Jennings' stucco house in silence. She sat on the living room sofa, hands resting gently on her lap, the ceiling fan slicing the air above her. The blinds were half drawn against the sun, casting narrow shadows across the beige tile floor, but even that couldn't dim the tension thickening in the room. Evan stood with his back to her, pacing like a dog too big for its own leash. His shoulders were tense, his voice low but vicious. "You can't keep dragging this out, Mom. You're 71. You think you're going to be hosting poker nights here into your 80s? Clara didn't respond. Her eyes remained fixed on the muted television across the room, though she hadn't registered a word of it in the last 10 minutes. He turned abruptly, voice louder now, his eyes sharp with entitlement. "You'll die here, not live here." On the armchair to the right, Lydia let out a light laugh and took a long sip of wine from Clara's own glass. "Well, at least you're honest," she said, crossing her legs. "Maybe we can finally start planning the remodel." Rachel sat on the edge of the coffee table, chin tucked down, fingers fiddling with the edge of her hoodie sleeve. Her eyes didn't meet anyone's, not her father's, not her grandmother's, just the floor. Clara blinked once, slowly, no tremor, no flinch. She didn't reach for a cane, didn't argue, didn't raise her voice. Her silence had always made Evan angrier than anything else. "This house is just wasting away with you in it," Evan continued, gesturing toward the front window like it offended him. "It needs to be working for someone. You can't even handle the landscaping. The HOA's already sent warnings." Clara's gaze shifted from the TV to the wine glass in Lydia's hand, the lipstick smudge just below the rim. Lydia noticed the stare and smiled thinly. "You could move in with other retirees. One of those places with yoga and water aerobics. You'd make friends." Clara's lips didn't move. Marcia always told her, never interrupt a man while he's burying himself. The air hung heavy. Nothing else moved. Evan finally threw his hands in the air and walked toward the hallway. "You'll see," he muttered. "Sooner or later, we'll be running this place. You're just keeping it warm." The hallway light snapped off behind him. Rachel stood but didn't follow. She looked at Clara, just for a second, before whispering, "I'm sorry," and disappearing down the hall. That evening, long after the house had gone quiet and Lydia's wine bottle clinked into the trash bin, Clara sat alone at her kitchen table. The floor was clean. She'd swept it herself that morning. A thin layer of lemon-scented polish still lingered in the air. Everything was in its place. Across the table, Marcia placed a deck of poker cards down between them and leaned back in her chair. "You know, I've heard a lot of rotten things come out of Evan's mouth, but that one," she shook her head, "that one had bite." Clara said nothing. "He doesn't know it yet," Marcia continued, pouring sweet tea into 2 glasses. "But I think he just buried himself." Clara stirred her tea once, twice. "Yes." "Does he know your name's the only one on the deed?" "No," Marcia grinned. "Good." Later, when the moon had stretched high over the cacti and the temperature finally dropped to tolerable, Clara moved to her bedroom and knelt carefully beside her old oak desk. Her knees popped, but she didn't grimace. From the second drawer, behind a stack of utility bills and a folder labeled Medical, she pulled out a worn leather portfolio. She set it on the bed, opened it, and spread out the crisp official pages. Her name was the only one printed. Clara M. Jennings, sole owner. She ran a finger across the embossed seal, her nails short and clean, not shared, not co-signed, not his. The house wasn't her prison. It was her power. And now, it was time to move the pieces. She turned off the light, the deed still in her hand. The light from the kitchen window slanted hard across the table, dust floating through the beam like silent witnesses. Clara laid the deed flat on the polished wood, smoothing the pages with both palms as if it were a battle map she'd studied for years. Her fingers didn't tremble, not now, not with this kind of clarity in her grip. She had made exactly 3 copies since Evan moved in. One stayed in the desk, one in her safety deposit box, and one, still sealed in a manila envelope, sat in the back of her freezer behind a half-empty carton of butter pecan. But tonight, the original stayed here. Out in the open, on display, Clara reached for her phone, careful and deliberate. The camera clicked with every page turned. Cover, interior, notary seal, date of filing, legal description. Her name stood alone on every line that mattered. Clara M. Jennings, sole owner. No joint tenancy. No co-owner. No inheritance clause. She paused before the final snap, letting the camera focus tight on the county recorder's embossed stamp. Her lips tightened into something close to satisfaction. In the echo of Evan's words, "You'll die here, not live here." She'd found a different kind of fire. She set the phone down and stared at the paperwork. "You used your mouth," she murmured to no one. "But I've got ink." She walked to the hallway phone nook and pulled the yellowed card from the shelf. The name Thomas Greer was scrawled in pen above his number, though she knew it by heart. 1 ring, 2, then a calm, steady voice. "Greer?" Clara didn't waste time. "It's time, Thomas. I'm ready to move." A pause on the line. "You still have the deed?" "Right in front of me. Clean. No liens, no names but mine." "I'll prep the paperwork tonight," he said. "We'll start quiet. No flags." Clara hung up without a goodbye, knowing Thomas would understand. Silence wasn't cold. It was efficient. As she turned to clean the kitchen, Rachel's soft footsteps creaked in from the hallway. She wore oversized socks and an oversized sweatshirt, her hair tied up in a loose, messy bun. She hesitated when she saw the table. Rachel's eyes locked on the document. "Is that the house deed?" Clara didn't answer right away. She just nodded, slow and firm. Rachel stepped closer, her voice barely audible. "Are you doing something with it?" Clara walked to her, placed a hand gently on her granddaughter's cheek. "I'm doing what needs to be done." Rachel looked like she wanted to say more, maybe warn her, maybe beg her to wait. But instead, she leaned into the hug Clara offered. Brief, tight, necessary. "Just be careful," Rachel whispered. "I always am." Rachel left the kitchen with that same quiet guilt Clara had seen in her eyes for weeks. Torn between blood and conscience, age and inheritance. Clara exhaled slowly, walked back to the table, and began stacking the papers. She slipped them back into the leather portfolio, then into the drawer where she kept only the things worth fighting over. Before she closed it, something caught her eye. A red envelope tucked between an energy bill and an old grocery receipt. She pulled it free. The letterhead read, "Desert Sands Credit Union, account notification." Her brow furrowed. She hadn't made any withdrawals. Not in weeks. The envelope tore open with a quick snap. Clara unfolded the notice inside. The amount wasn't massive, $2,500, but the line item detail burned into her vision. Homeowner equity line of credit. Withdrawal processed her account. Her house, her name, and her signature, forged in a handwriting just close enough to hers to fool someone who didn't know better. Clara didn't flinch. She didn't speak. She just reached for her pen, opened her checkbook, and underlined the name, Thomas Greer. The paper crackled in Clara's grip as she slid it across Thomas Greer's desk. Her jaw stayed tight, unmoving, while her eyes drilled into the forged signature like she could burn it off the page by will alone. Thomas adjusted his reading glasses and leaned in close. His office smelled faintly of old wood and lemon oil. Orderly, professional, calm. He studied the loops and pressure marks carefully. his brows pulling together as he compared it to Clara's driver's license. "Did you sign this?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. "No," Clara said flatly. "But it's my name, slapped on a loan I never asked for." He turned the paper slowly in his hands. "They filed this with Desert Sands Credit Union." Clara nodded once. "They pulled money." "I found the notice last night." Thomas clicked his pen, scribbled a note, then tapped the forged signature. This is felony level, unauthorized loan application, forgery. Financial elder abuse if we file it right." "Then file it right," Clara said. He looked up at her. "You want to go nuclear?" Clara folded her hands. "No, I want to go accurate." He nodded, already reaching for a document folder. "I'll notify the bank and freeze the request immediately. No funds will be released beyond what they've already stolen." Clara's expression didn't soften. "That money comes back." Thomas paused. "Eventually. But the bigger win is control and proving intent." She nodded again. This wasn't about dollars. It was about direction. If Evan wanted to drag her downhill, she was going to make sure the road behind him crumbled with every step. A soft chime interrupted them. Thomas glanced toward the door and called out, "Come in." Marcia stepped in with her sunglasses perched on her head and a grin like she already knew something delicious. "I was in the neighborhood," she said, setting a brown paper bag on the side table. "Brought you both lemon muffins." "Don't say I never feed your wars." Thomas chuckled, but Clara didn't move. Marcia caught the look and tilted her head. "That bad?" "He forged my signature for a loan," Clara said evenly. "Tried to bleed the house dry before I was gone." Marcia whistled low. "Well, that's not just stepping over a line. That's dancing on it in boots." Clara reached for her purse and stood. "I'm not dancing." Marcia looked between the two of them, then back to Clara. "You're going to nail him with it, aren't you?" Clara's voice was calm, icy. "I'm going to leave him with nothing he can cash in." By the time Clara returned home, the evening sun had begun to sag low behind the red-tinted horizon. The stucco walls of her home glowed orange, casting long shadows across the driveway. Through the cracked living room window, she heard voices, Evan's voice, loud and smug. "She thinks she's got options," he said, laughing. "Once she's gone, this place is ours." Lydia's laugh followed, high and hollow. "You mean once she croaks." "Same difference," Evan said. "I already made a move, used her name to pull some funds. Just a few more weeks, and we'll make this place look like it belongs on a magazine cover." Clara stepped back from the window before the rage could show on her face. They thought she was background noise, a soft old woman who folded under pressure. What they didn't realize, what they'd never understand, was that she had never once let anyone write her final line. She walked slowly to the door, the muffled voices still spilling from inside. They were planning her exit, but Clara was already drawing up theirs. The next morning, Clara moved like a woman setting a trap. Sunlight filtered through the blinds in precise slats, striping the linoleum floor. She stood barefoot in her kitchen, one hand gripping the counter, the other holding a small digital voice recorder she'd bought years ago for grocery reminders. Now it had a higher calling. She bent slowly, knees cracking, and tucked the recorder behind a ceramic flour canister near the toaster. The blinking red light vanished into the shadows. Then she waited. She didn't have to wait long. By noon, Evan barged into the kitchen, slamming the fridge door after yanking out a soda. "We're doing all the work in this house," he grumbled, cracking the can open like it had personally insulted him. "She just sits there watching the walls rot." Lydia entered seconds later, heels clicking against the tile, voice syrupy sweet. "Oh, come on. She'll be out soon enough. One fall, one doctor's visit, and it's ours." Evan scoffed. "She's dead weight. A drain. I'm not waiting till she croaks on her own schedule." Lydia let out a laugh, short and sharp. "We'll sell the place ourselves." She doesn't even check her bank statements. Clara sat motionless in the adjacent den, heart steady. Every syllable of that poison was being captured. Every vile word stamped into digital memory. Later that evening, when the house emptied for grocery runs and Lydia's yoga class, Clara retrieved the recorder with gloved hands. She plugged it into her laptop and transferred the audio files. She didn't listen. She didn't need to. She'd heard enough with her own ears. She labeled the file kitchen_recording_04_14, encrypted it, and copied it to a slim black flash drive. The kind with no label, no identity, just quiet power. That same night, as she sat at the dining room table organizing the documents Thomas requested, Rachel lingered nearby with a hesitant step. She clutched an envelope, thumb tapping its edge like she couldn't decide whether to hand it over or hide it again. Clara noticed. "Something on your mind, sweetheart," Rachel approached. Her voice was small. "I didn't know if I should give you this, but it's been bothering me." Clara held out her hand. Rachel placed the envelope into her palm. Inside were 7 faded receipts. Gas, groceries, a fancy restaurant Clara had never stepped foot in. All charged to her card. All signed in a familiar, arrogant scrawl. "I found them in Dad's desk drawer," Rachel said. "He used your card last month. He said it was his right. Family money. That's what he called it." Clara looked at her granddaughter for a long moment. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" "I was scared," Rachel whispered, "but I'm more scared of what he's doing now." Clara reached across the table and placed her hand gently over Rachel's. "You did right. You're not part of this." That night, Clara returned to Thomas's office. The lights were dim, his tie loosened, and the manila folder in front of him already growing thick. She laid the flash drive on his desk like a dagger. "Audio from my kitchen," she said. "They don't know I have it." Thomas plugged it into his laptop, listened with his brows knitting tighter with every second. "Jesus," he muttered, pausing the file. "She says they'll sell it behind your back." "And Evan calls me dead weight," Clara replied coolly. He sat back, face firm. "This is airtight. We've got intent, coercion, misuse of finances, and now verbal admission." She slid the receipts forward. "Add theft to the list." Thomas nodded slowly. "We're not building a case. We're building a fortress." "Good," Clara said, standing. "Because I'm done playing defense." He handed her a new folder. "Last step. Update your will." She opened it. The legal document was blank, ready for her instructions. Clara took the pen, its weight cold and satisfying in her grip, and brought the tip to the page. It was time to erase names that had long since erased her humanity. The pen glided across the page like it had a purpose of its own. Clara Jennings didn't hesitate, not once, as she signed her name at the bottom of the final document. This was not a decision made in anger. It was made in clarity, one painful detail at a time. Thomas Greer, seated across from her in his quiet, sunlit office, gently tapped the corner of the newly revised will with one finger. "This document removes Evan and Lydia entirely. There's no ambiguity." "Good," Clara said, her voice measured. "They've earned exactly that." He flipped the page and continued. "Rachel becomes the sole beneficiary, held in trust until she turns 25. You'll remain trustee until then. If anything happens to her, the house and remainder of your estate go to the Arizona Futures Education Fund. That's also official now." Clara offered a slow, almost imperceptible nod. "The money will go to people who value growth, not entitlement." Thomas reached for the notary stamp, pausing only to glance at her. "You've also got the no contest clause, just as you requested. If Evan tries to dispute anything, he forfeits all rights, even as next of kin." "He'll try," Clara said, folding her hands. "He just won't win." The cool, dry air inside the office was a relief from Phoenix's desert sun. But Clara could still feel the heat of everything she'd endured in the past few weeks. Evan's threats, Lydia's mockery, Rachel's quiet dread. Now, finally, she was responding in the language they would understand. Legal ink. Thomas sealed the documents in a heavy envelope. "I'll file this at the courthouse tomorrow and drop off a certified copy at your home. Keep it locked up. It'll go in the fireproof box," Clara said, standing slowly. Her joints protested, but her will did not. Thomas followed her to the door. For what it's worth, Clara, this was the right call. That boy doesn't just want your house. He wants your silence. Clara turned, her eyes sharper than the summer light pouring through the hallway windows. Then I've just made myself louder than he can handle. That evening, Clara moved with careful precision through her house. She stored the legal envelope in the back of her bedroom closet, tucked beneath a box labeled Christmas wreaths. From there, she moved to her small desk in the hallway and opened her checkbook. With one line, one signature, she closed the joint account she'd opened for Evan's emergencies, an account he'd treated like his own bank. She poured herself a cup of tea, jasmine, hot, steaming. And as she settled into her chair by the window, she stared out at the stucco homes lining the street, each one soaking in the last of the Arizona sun. She didn't smile. She didn't frown. She just existed, fully aware, fully certain. She whispered softly to herself, "Now the house is mine to move." Across town, Evan Jennings stood at a Circle K, card in hand, rage tightening his throat as he stabbed it into the reader again and again. Declined. He glared at the cashier, then at the machine, then down at the card as if it had betrayed him. A cold wave rolled across his chest, not panic, not yet, but the shadow of it. Something had changed. Back at Clara's house, Rachel walked down the hall quietly, peeking in just as Clara took a final sip from her mug. "Is everything okay?" she asked, her voice small but clear. Clara looked up, her face calm. "Everything's beginning." Rachel stepped into the room, unsure. "You changed the will, didn't you?" Clara nodded once. "You're protected now, but you'll have to be strong." "I can be," Rachel whispered. "For you." Clara reached over and took her hand. Her fingers were soft, but her grip was solid. "You already are." Just then, Clara's landline rang, one of the few still left in the neighborhood. She let it ring twice, then picked up. The automated voice was calm, corporate, and cold. "This is a courtesy alert from Desert Horizon Bank. A transaction attempt has been declined on your previously linked joint debit account. If you believe this is an error..." Clara hung up before it finished. She set the receiver down gently, her eyes steady on the empty doorway across the hall. The card was dead. The account was closed. And Evan didn't know it yet. But he would. Very soon. The receipt crumpled in Evan's fist like a warning flare. He stood frozen at the checkout counter of a CVS, his jaw tightening as the screen flashed again. Transaction declined. The young cashier shifted nervously, glancing from the monitor to Evan's twitching hands. "There's gotta be some mistake," Evan muttered, swiping the card a third time. It beeped, red. Again. Behind him, a woman coughed impatiently. Another tapped her foot. "I said..." Evan raised his voice, then stopped. Something cold slid down the back of his spine. This wasn't a system error. This was a message. From Clara. He left the store without the batteries, slamming the glass door so hard the handle rattled. At Clara's stucco home, the late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the living room tiles. Clara sat in her reading chair, watering a small potted cactus with a teaspoon. Her fingers were deliberate, slow, precise. The front door burst open like a shotgun blast. Evan's voice hit first. "What the hell did you do?" Clara didn't flinch. She set the teaspoon on its saucer and looked up. "You know," she said evenly, "for someone who keeps claiming this house is his, you still..." Use a key. He marched toward her, face flushed. "You shut off the joint card? That account was for emergencies. My truck's overdue on repairs." "I got bills, Mom." "I had bills too," Clara replied calmly. "For decades. Somehow I paid them on my own." Lydia trailed behind him, arms crossed, wearing an oversized pair of sunglasses and a twisted smirk. "You want to play dirty? Fine, we can go lower." "I'm not playing," Clara said. "You're not thinking clearly either," Lydia snapped. "You've been getting forgetful lately, misplacing things." Repeating yourself, Clara stood, slow but steady. "That's how you're going to do it? Paint me as incompetent?" Evan jabbed a finger toward her chest. "We'll have you declared unfit to manage anything. That includes money. That includes this house. The room dropped into silence. Clara could hear the refrigerator humming faintly in the kitchen, the desert wind brushing the windows, a creak from the hallway. Rachel. She had been sitting on the stairs just out of sight, her phone clutched in her lap. The red light was blinking. She'd hit record the second she heard Evan yell. From the staircase, she called out without hesitation. "You're threatening her." Again Evan spun around. "Stay out of this, Rachel." "No," she said. "I won't." Clara's voice, though quiet, filled the room. "The joint account is closed. I have no more ties to you financially. And if you think threats are going to intimidate me now, you're more forgetful than I am." Lydia marched toward Rachel. "Turn that off." Rachel stepped back, gripping the phone tighter. "It's already saved to the cloud." Marcia, who had let herself in through the backsliding door, unapologetically as usual, stood leaning against the kitchen counter with a half-empty Tupperware of brownies in hand. She had heard enough. "Now that," she said, biting into a square, "is golden court." Evan's face went pale. "You had people listening?" "I had you talking," Clara replied. He glared at her, but for once, didn't speak. "You said you'd drain me," Clara said as she moved back to her chair. "You did, piece by piece, emotionally, financially, so I drained you back. Difference is, my tank still has fuel." Evan stormed past Rachel and out the front door without another word. Lydia followed a second later, mumbling curses as she passed Marcia, who winked and offered her a brownie. Later that night, Clara opened her mailbox. She sorted past coupons and charity flyers until she came to a manila envelope. From the Superior Court of Maricopa County, she slid it open with her fingernail, already knowing. Inside, a summons, a guardianship hearing, filed by Evan Jennings. She stared at the paper under the porch light, then walked inside, locked the door, and set the envelope on the kitchen counter. Without breaking stride, she reached for the flash drive Rachel had, handed her earlier, and slid it into the front pocket of her cardigan. Let him come, she thought. Let him bring everything. Because this time, she had more than paper. She had proof. The courtroom smelled faintly of lemon polish and nervous sweat. Clara sat upright in the stiff wooden chair, spine straight, hands folded in her lap like she was back in her old classroom waiting to hand out a pop quiz. The fluorescent lights hummed above her, but her mind was steady, clear. Across the aisle, Evan slouched in his chair, his arms crossed tight over his chest. Lydia leaned close to whisper something in his ear, but he only grunted. Eyes locked on Clara like she was a criminal awaiting sentencing. She looked right back at him and didn't blink. "Mrs. Jennings," the court-appointed evaluator said gently, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses. "Let's begin with some simple questions, if that's all right with you." Clara nodded once. "I'm ready." "What day is it today?" "Wednesday," she answered. "September 10th. "And the year?" 2025. "You can ask for the weather, too. It's 104 and rising." A few chuckles rippled behind her. Evan rolled his eyes. The doctor smiled faintly, flipping to the next page. "Can you tell me your current address?" She listed it off without hesitation, including her own ZIP code and subdivision. "I've lived in that house since 1998, she added. "Mortgage paid off in 2010. Evan shifted uncomfortably. The questions continued, but Clara answered them all, accurately, confidently, and with the calm precision of a woman who used to grade calculus exams during lunch breaks. Her memory was sharp, her logic airtight, her demeanor unshakable. The evaluator turned to the judge after 30 minutes and spoke with careful certainty. "Mrs. Jennings is lucid, organized, and entirely capable of managing her own affairs. Her cognitive evaluation is not only normal for her age, it's above average." Clara didn't smile. She didn't need to. Judge Alvarado raised an eyebrow and turned to Evan. "Mr. Jennings, would you like to address the court before I make a ruling?" Evan stood, smoothing his shirt like he was trying to look more respectable. "Your Honor, my mother has a history of forgetfulness. Misplacing bills, repeating stories." She needs supervision. She just won't admit it. This isn't about money, Rachel's voice cut across the courtroom like a blade. That's not true. Heads turned. She stood up from the wooden bench in the back, clutching her phone in her hand. She's sharp, smarter than either of you ever gave her credit for. The only thing she forgets is why she trusted you for so long. The courtroom quieted. Rachel took a deep breath. He doesn't want to help her. He wants her house, her money. He's been using her accounts behind her back. I've seen the statements. Lydia hissed. Rachel, sit down. She's telling the truth, Clara said evenly, her eyes never leaving Evans. You knew I'd never hand you the deed. So you tried to take everything else. The judge cleared his throat. Enough. He shuffled a few papers, then looked directly at Clara. The court finds Mrs. Jennings fully competent and sees no basis for guardianship. The petition is denied, effective immediately. Lydia let out a gasp. Evan cursed under his breath. Clara let her hands relax on her lap. She didn't smile, but the victory settled on her shoulders like a warm shawl. Outside the courtroom, as the Arizona sun poured down in waves, Rachel wrapped her arms around her grandmother. You crushed them in there, she whispered. Clara patted her back gently. I taught high school math for 30 years. Compared to that, this was a cakewalk. Marcia appeared at the courthouse steps, sunglasses perched high on her nose, waving a manila folder. Got the transcript request already submitted, she grinned. Figured you'd want a souvenir. Clara chuckled, her mood light for the first time in weeks. Let's frame it. But the lightness faded quickly when they returned home. Inside the house, the quiet was too quiet. Clara opened the medicine cabinet above the bathroom sink and paused. Her weekly pill case, meticulously organized with labeled doses, was gone. She checked the drawer beneath it, then the box under the sink, then the back of the linen closet. Nothing. She turned slowly, the tile floor cool under her bare feet, her breath narrowing into suspicion. Someone had been in here, and someone didn't want her thinking straight anymore. Not just a financial attack now. They were playing dirty, and she was just getting started. The moment Clara saw Evan's car keys left on the kitchen counter, she moved. She grabbed them with a calm so precise it bordered on surgical, walked straight to the driveway, and opened the SUV with a hollow beep. The desert heat clung to her skin like sweat-soaked cotton as she yanked open the driver's door and rifled through the compartments. Napkins, work receipts, protein bar wrappers. Then, in the glove box, she found them. Her pill organizer, still loaded with this week's doses, unopened, hidden on purpose. She held the plastic case in her hand, thumb brushing across the familiar green lid marked Monday through Sunday. Her initials, CJ, were still written in her careful black ink. The garage door creaked open behind her. What the hell are you doing in my car? Evan barked, stepping into the sunlight, phone in hand, barefoot and furious. Clara didn't flinch. She turned slowly, holding the pill box like a badge, looking for what you stole. Evan's face darkened. That's not yours to go through. This is mine, she replied, voice low but firm. You hid my meds, Evan. From the cabinet. From me. He scoffed, adjusting his phone like he might film her instead. You're overreacting. You don't need half that stuff. You're fine. You were still walking, weren't you? Clara pulled out her phone and hit record without breaking eye contact. Say that again. What? Say it again. Tell me I don't need the medications prescribed by 2 licensed physicians. Go ahead. This time, make sure it's loud and clear. Evan hesitated. He knew, somewhere in his twisted logic, he knew he'd crossed from manipulation to criminality. You're paranoid, he muttered, turning away. Clara ended the recording, walked past him with the pill box in one hand and his keys in the other. She dropped them both on the kitchen table with a clack. Never touch my body, my health, or my house again. He didn't respond. She didn't wait for one. That afternoon, Thomas Greer leaned over the conference table in his law office, scanning the pill organizer and listening intently to the new audio recording. He sat back in his chair, fingers steepled. This tips it. Clara nodded once. This, combined with the forgery, financial misuse, and failed guardianship claim, creates a cumulative pattern of abuse, elder exploitation, coercive control, and now medical endangerment, Thomas continued. He weaponized your own health against you. He won't walk away from this in court. Clara remained still. Her focus was lethal. Good. Thomas looked up. You still okay proceeding? I'm better than okay. I'm ready. That evening, Clara sat on her front porch as the Arizona sky burned orange. The creosote in the air smelled sharp and earthy after a short rain. Marcia arrived with a plastic container of still warm pot roast and the week's poker gossip. But the moment Clara mentioned the meds, Marcia froze mid-step. He hid your pills, she said, jaw slack, in his glove box. Jesus, that's not just petty. That's medieval. She set the food down harder than she meant to. You tell Thomas. Immediately. He said it pushes us over the line, legally. Marcia shook her head, seething. He's not just greedy. He's dangerous. Inside, Rachel was silent, curled on the couch with her knees pulled to her chest. When Clara sat beside her, Rachel looked up with guilt swimming behind her glasses. I saw him go through the cabinet, she whispered. I didn't know he was taking something. I just thought... I don't know what I thought. Clara took her hand gently. You're not to blame, sweetheart. I could have said something. You are now. That's enough. Rachel turned toward her, voice quaking. If I need to talk in court, I will. Clara squeezed her hand. You won't have to stand alone. 2 days later, Thomas called. They filed the paperwork. Exploitation hearing is set for Friday next. Clara leaned back in her chair, her fingers steady as they pressed against the wooden arms. The hum of the AC unit ticked in the background, but she barely noticed. It was on the calendar now, in ink. What Evan thought would end in her decline was about to be his legal collapse. The courthouse smelled like paper and panic. Clara sat on the left side of the courtroom, her hands folded neatly in her lap, wearing the same slate blue blazer she once wore for teacher evaluations. Rachel sat beside her, shoulders squared, jaw tight. On the right sat Evan, puffed up, red-faced, bouncing his knee like he was waiting for a bomb to go off, and Lydia, chewing her nail with her crossed arms clenched across her stomach. Thomas stood calmly in front of the judge, voice cool, deliberate. Your Honor, we will present evidence of financial exploitation, signature forgery, intentional concealment of medication, and documented verbal abuse, all of which fall under Arizona statute for elder abuse and coercive control. The judge, a woman in her 60s with reading glasses and silver-streaked hair, nodded. Proceed. Thomas began with the deed. This document, recorded 15 years ago, confirms the sole ownership of the property at 2140 South Manzanita Drive as belonging to Ms. Clara Jennings. You'll notice, no co-owners, no liens, no transfers. He slid it across to the clerk, then held up another page. Now compare it to this. A forged inquiry to a mortgage broker, bearing Ms. Jennings's falsified signature, submitted by her son, Mr. Evan Jennings. Evan muttered something under his breath. Lydia jabbed him in the ribs. Thomas wasn't done. Audio evidence recorded from within Miss Jennings' home reveals Mr. Jennings referring to her as deadweight and expressing intent to sell the home without her consent. We'll also submit the recording of a separate confrontation, in which he admits to hiding her prescribed medication, critical to her daily health. The flash drive clicked into the courtroom monitor. Evan's voice filled the room. She doesn't need half that stuff. She's fine, followed by Clara's voice, clear, controlled. You hid my medication from me. Even Lydia winced at the sound of it. When the audio stopped, Thomas turned toward the table. Miss Lydia Jennings, would you care to explain the signature on the credit withdrawal application, dated April 9th? Lydia's lips parted, then closed again. Her eyes darted to Evan. I don't recall. You don't recall, the judge repeated dryly, under oath. Correct, Lydia said quickly. It wasn't me. Thomas raised a brow, flipping a receipt. Odd. That same day, Miss, Jennings' joint account was used at Louis & Sons Jewelry, a store you previously mentioned, under oath, as one of your favorites. Lydia froze, then stammered. I mean, I might have used her card before, but… Thank you, Thomas said, not unkindly. No further questions. Clara sat still as stone. The judge turned. Rachel Jennings, please approach. Rachel stood, trembling slightly as she made her way to the witness box. Her hands shook as she adjusted the microphone. You're Ms. Jennings' granddaughter. Yes. And you live in the home? Yes. Have you witnessed any of the behaviors mentioned today? Rachel took a breath that rattled in her chest. Yes. I heard my dad say Grandma didn't need her medicine. I found her pill case missing. I saw him use her card. And I recorded them threatening to get her declared incompetent. They said she'd be easier to move if she were locked away. Evan snapped. That's enough. The judge banged her gavel. You will not interrupt this court, Mr. Jennings. Rachel didn't flinch. She held the judge's gaze like it was a lifeline. I believe my grandmother is sharp, capable, and I trust her more than anyone else in my family. Thomas nodded quietly from his table. The judge leaned back, hands folded. In my courtroom, evidence speaks. Audio, financial, documents, and witness testimony have made it very clear that Ms. Clara Jennings is of sound mind and has been the subject of calculated exploitation. This court finds in favor of Miss Jennings. Evan slumped in his chair. The property at 2140 South Manzanita remains legally and solely hers. Any further interference will be subject to criminal charges. This case is closed. The gavel cracked like a gunshot. Clara didn't smile. She stood, thanked the judge with a graceful nod, and turned toward Thomas as they stepped into the hallway's echoing quiet. Outside, Evan was already on the phone, yelling into the wind. Clara looked at Thomas, voice soft but firm. List the house. He blinked. You're sure? I want it gone. He said I'd die in that house. She glanced back at the courtroom door, her eyes cold as steel. I'd rather bury his expectations than myself. And with that, she walked on, leaving the courthouse and Evan's entitlement behind. The for sale sign hit the front lawn like a hammer on a coffin. Clara stood behind the iron gate, the morning heat already rising off the Phoenix pavement, shimmering across the desert-dry yard. A realtor in crisp navy slacks leaned the sign into the brittle soil and pressed it deep. Keller Williams, move-in ready, call now. The red letters were bold against the pale stucco backdrop. Evan's voice exploded from the open garage. What the hell is that? He charged out barefoot, shirtless, phone in hand. His rage blurred his movements, like a wasp caught in a glass jar. You can't do this. You can't sell this house. Clara didn't flinch. She adjusted her sunglasses and turned to face him with military precision. I already did. The silence that followed cracked wider than the heat lines in the driveway. Evan's jaw clenched, and for a moment it looked like he might throw his phone. Lydia stumbled out behind him, her face still blotchy from sleep, robe dragging behind her like a curtain in the wind. You're joking, she said, eyeing the sign like it was a bomb. You're actually doing this. No, Clara said, her voice cool. I've done it. The paperwork's already filed with the county, listings live, and I've made sure every dollar is traceable, protected, and fully out of your reach. Lydia's voice cracked. This was supposed to be Evan's. You can't just… I can, Clara interrupted. And I did. Evan turned to the realtor. Take that down. I'm telling you, take it down, the man blinked. Sir, I was hired by Miss Jennings. She's the sole property owner on record. Clara's lips barely curved. You're trespassing now, Evan. Rachel had stepped out onto the porch behind her grandmother, still in pajamas, but with arms crossed like armor. She looked from the sign to her father, then to Clara. A slow smile crept across her face, quiet but undeniable. Inside, Marcia arrived with coffee and an apple fritter, just in time to catch the tail end of Lydia's meltdown. She set the pastry down on the counter and peeked out the window. God, I haven't seen Lydia that hysterical since someone spilled red wine on her marble backsplash, she muttered. Clara didn't respond. She watched the sign in the yard like it was a final chess move. Marcia leaned in, her voice proud and low. Now that's justice. Watching him scramble like a rat when the lights come on. Rachel sat at the table, quiet but observant, her laptop open to a tab marked Zillow, pending listings. The house was already listed. Clara sipped her tea and tilted her head. It's not about revenge, she said. Marcia raised a brow. No, it's about closure. I gave him a place to live. He tried to bury me in it. Now I'm giving him what he wanted, just without the comfort. That night, the house felt different, airier, as if the walls themselves were breathing again. Rachel helped Clara box up old photos and china, placing heirlooms in bubble wrap, labeling bins in her looping handwriting. Marcia stayed late, helping sort old tax records, her blunt commentary punctuating the room like poker chips hitting a table. Clara paused to stare at a portrait of her late husband, still hanging above the mantel. She reached out, touching the edge of the frame. We built this place with our own hands, she whispered. He would have sold it for a used truck and a TV. Rachel looked up. He never appreciated what he had. Then it's time someone else does. At 5:42 a.m., Clara's phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. She padded into the kitchen in her robe, blinking sleep from her eyes. One unread message blinked on the screen. Offer received. 2,140 South Manzanita. Above asking. Cash. She set the phone down slowly, heart steady, pulse strong. Before the sun had even crested the horizon, someone else had claimed the house Evan thought was his inheritance. Clara turned to the window. Outside, the for sale sign stood proud under the pinkening sky. And behind her, the future moved one step closer. The final signature was still wet when Clara lowered the pen. The buyer across from her beamed, clasping her hand with a warm grip and excited chatter about remodeling the guest room. Clara nodded politely, but her mind was elsewhere. Not in the color schemes or backyard plans, but in the cold, final justice of what had just taken place. Thomas closed the contract folder with a firm snap. Filed first thing in the morning, he said. By noon, the transfer will be official. The buyer left shortly after, keys not yet exchanged, but intent clear. The house was no longer Evan's battlefield. It was sold. Legally, irrevocably. Clara stood in the foyer and looked out through the glass-paneled door. The late Arizona sun had begun to dip, casting amber streaks across the tiled floor. The for sale sign still stood proudly on the lawn, but soon it would come. Down. It had served its purpose. The front door slammed open. Evan barreled inside, cheeks flushed, arms flailing like someone who'd just seen the gallows raised. Tell me this is a joke, he roared. You didn't actually sell it. You can't. This is my house. Clara didn't flinch. She took a step forward and met his eyes. It was never yours. Lydia stormed in behind him, heels clicking furiously. You conniving old witch. After everything we did for you? Rachel entered from the hallway, standing halfway between the shouting match and her grandmother, hands tight at her sides. Clara's voice was calm, almost gentle. You did nothing for me. You did things to me. There's a difference. Thomas appeared from the study, voice steady. The sale is already recorded with the county. You're trespassing now, Evan's face contorted. He opened his mouth to scream again, but Lydia grabbed his arm and yanked. We are not getting arrested over her, she hissed. She dragged him out, slamming the door behind them so hard it rattled the stained glass panels. Clara turned to Thomas and gave a single nod. Rachel rushed over, her arms wrapping around Clara's waist. You did it, she whispered. You really did it. Clara stroked her granddaughter's hair. He promised my death. I signed his eviction. Marcia arrived minutes later, a bottle of sparkling apple cider under one arm. You'll want to toast to this, she said with a grin. Phoenix hasn't seen a takedown this clean since that crooked HOA president got booted. They gathered in the kitchen, Thomas uncorking the bottle with a loud pop. The glasses clinked, laughter filled the room, and even Clara allowed herself a moment to close her eyes and breathe in the sound. It wasn't just relief, it was reclaiming. As the sky darkened and Marcia helped tidy up, Clara pulled Thomas aside. "You said the sale's official tomorrow. When does enforcement begin?" Thomas looked at his watch. "I'll file the sheriff's eviction notice first thing. Depending on the backlog, they could show up by Friday." Clara's lips curled into something small but satisfied. Let them pack in the dark. That night, as Clara sat by the living room window with Rachel sleeping quietly upstairs, a quiet knock came at the door. She opened it to find a uniformed deputy with a clipboard. "Clara Jennings? Just wanted to inform you the eviction's been scheduled. Official notice will be posted in the morning." Clara took the paper with steady hands, glanced at the date, and nodded. "Thank you, officer." As the door clicked shut behind her, she placed the paper gently on the mantel, beside the deed and the freshly signed closing documents. One more sunrise, and Evan would be gone. Not in theory, not in promises, but in paperwork, muscle, and law. This time, he wouldn't talk his way out of it. This time, the door would shut behind him for good. The sound of wheels dragging across pavement echoed through the quiet suburban street as movers rolled Evan's last box out of Clara's front door. The September heat in Phoenix shimmered off the concrete, turning the driveway into a spotlight. And standing at the center of it all, red-faced and seething, was Evan Jennings. The sheriff stood calmly on the porch, arms crossed, unmoved by Evan's rants. "Sir, I need you to step off the property now. It's not yours. It's hers." "She can't do this. This is my house," Evan bellowed, his voice cracking under the strain. Sweat glistened on his forehead, and his fingers twitched like he was one accusation away from unraveling. Clara stood inside the threshold, back straight, watching the chaos unfold with a stillness that unnerved even the sheriff. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. The deed, the ruling, the eviction notice, they had done the talking for her. Lydia stood a few feet away from Evan, arms crossed tightly, sunglasses perched on her nose like armor. "This is elder abuse," she muttered to no one in particular. The sheriff turned slightly toward her. "No, ma'am, this is court-ordered property enforcement. If you don't vacate peacefully, you'll be charged." Across the street, neighbors peeked from behind blinds and porch railings, their murmurs rustling like dry leaves. A few held their phones discreetly, recording the spectacle. This wasn't the kind of drama their cul-de-sac usually hosted. Evan kicked at one of the moving boxes on the curb. "Unbelievable. She wouldn't even have that house without me." Clara finally stepped forward, slowly and with purpose. The hem of her pale blouse danced in the warm breeze. She paused at the top step, her voice low and unshaking. "You didn't give me that house, Evan. Your father and I built it. You tried to steal it. There's a difference." Rachel stood at her grandmother's side, arms tucked protectively around her. She looked down at Evan, then up at Clara, and gave her a quiet, proud smile. Lydia rolled her eyes and barked, "This isn't over. You think one judge in a sale changes anything?" "Yes," Clara said simply, stepping back into her home. "Because it's done." Evan spun toward the sheriff. "We have nowhere to go. This is all a mistake. She's not well." The sheriff nodded toward the truck. "Your things are there. This isn't a debate. Move on." Box after box hit the curb with hollow thuds. A suitcase burst open, spilling shirts and crumpled receipts onto the sidewalk. Lydia knelt to gather them, but the dust from the street clung to everything she touched. As the sun sank behind the stucco houses, casting long shadows across the yard, the heat didn't break, but Clara's silence did. She turned to Rachel, voice softer now. "We didn't just win the house. We reclaimed our peace." Marcia strolled up from next door, holding 2 lemonades. She handed one to Clara without a word, then tilted her chin toward the curb. "Looks like they'll be staying at the Red Roof Inn tonight." Clara allowed herself the faintest smile. the kind that came from the tired victory. She took a sip. Tart, chilled, perfect. A horn honked at the end of the street, the moving truck pulling away. Evan and Lydia remained by the curb, red-faced and silent now, their fortress dismantled in broad daylight. The house loomed behind them, no longer a battleground but a reclaimed throne. Rachel took a photo on her phone, then quickly tucked it away, just in case they try to twist the story later. Inside, Clara closed the door gently behind her. She exhaled, the kind of breath that had waited years to be released. An hour later, her phone buzzed. Unknown number, the text read. We'd like to speak with you about your story. Local press. People should hear what you did. She stared at the message, then smiled again, this time wider, fuller, with a sharp glint in her eye. The world was about to find out what Clara Jennings had done. The headline stretched bold across the top of the Sunday Metro section. Widow outsmarts son's exploitation scheme. Just beneath it, a full-color photo of Clara Jennings standing in front of her now-sold home, arms folded, eyes steel straight into the camera. She wore her lavender blouse, the one she reserved for serious moments. It had once been her husband's favorite. Clara sat at the kitchen table of her new condo, newspapers spread neatly before her. The sun filtered through the blinds, painting pale gold stripes across the table. Rachel sat across from her, fingers tracing the printed words, her face lit with something halfway between awe and relief. "Grandma," she whispered, eyes wide. "You're a legend." Clara gave a small, dry laugh. "I'm 71 years old. About time I became something." The article detailed everything with restrained precision. The forged signature, the guardianship petition, the sale, the sheriff's removal. The reporter had done their homework, and for once, Clara felt like the truth hadn't been diluted. No spin, no sympathy baiting, just facts. Facts that painted her as exactly what she was: resilient, composed, and ruthlessly prepared. The phone had already started ringing by 9 a.m. Marcia was the first. "Well, damn, Clara," she said, her voice hoarse from excitement. "You didn't just take the high road, you paved it with the bones of the dumbasses who tried to screw you." Clara chuckled, sipping her coffee. "I just played the cards they dealt me." "I happen to count cards." Marcia barked a laugh. "Remind me never to piss you off." Thomas called next, voice even but clearly amused. "You buried him." "Legally. And publicly," Marcia added from the background. Apparently, she'd merged the calls. "No grave for me today," Clara said, folding the paper in half. "I've got things to do." What followed was a quiet ripple across their community. Older women from the senior center called to offer congratulations. A few asked for Thomas's number, curious about updating their wills or tightening power of attorney clauses. Clara didn't just win her house. She ignited a movement of quietly fed-up women who'd been made to feel expendable. Rachel, always one to hide behind earbuds and books, now sat upright in Clara's living room, texting with a new boldness. She showed her friends the article. She even shared the link on social media with the caption, "My grandmother is the sharpest woman I know." Don't underestimate her generation. Clara noticed the change. Rachel asked more questions, paid more attention, helped without being asked. One afternoon, Clara walked into the kitchen to find her organizing the pantry by expiration date. "Just thought it might help," Rachel said shyly. Clara paused, kissed the top of her head. "It does." Later that week, the local radio station called, asking if Clara would consider doing a segment on elder abuse and estate protection. She declined the live interview but offered to write something. Words were tools. She had learned how to sharpen them, but not everything was applause. One envelope came in the mail with no return address. Inside, a single folded piece of notebook paper. The handwriting was familiar. Angry loops, uneven lines. The envelope sat untouched on Clara's kitchen table, cream-colored and smudged from being crammed through the mail slot. Her name was scribbled in her son's slanted, anxious handwriting. No return address, but she didn't need one. She recognized the desperation behind every crooked letter. Clara didn't touch it right away. Instead, she made herself tea, black, no sugar, and set it beside the letter as if daring it to flinch. The sun crept across the tile floor, catching the edge of the paper like it too waited for her verdict. Finally, she slit the envelope open with the same letter opener she used to open her Social Security documents. A clean, practiced motion. The letter unfolded like something limp and tired. The words were heavy with self-pity. "Mom, I've made mistakes. I see that now. Lydia's gone. Rachel won't speak to me. I lost the house. I lost everything. You won. Please, just talk to me. Maybe we can fix this." She stopped reading there. Clara didn't care to hear the rest. There were no apologies, just consequences disguised as regrets. Her eyes stayed dry. Her back didn't bend. Rachel peeked in from the hallway, cautious. "Is that from him?" Clara nodded once, brief as a blink. She folded the letter in half, then in half again, until it was no bigger than a matchbook. "That's all he deserves." Rachel stepped closer, watching as Clara struck a match with the same steadiness she once used to grade equations. The flame licked the edge of the paper. Clara walked to the fireplace and dropped it in. They stood there together, silent, as Evan's final plea curled into ash. Thomas arrived minutes later, briefcase in one hand, envelope in the other. "I thought I'd come by in person," he said. "You should be the first to see this." He handed her the thick sealed envelope. Clara opened it slowly, methodically, revealing a cashier's check and notarized sale documents. The sum was clear, exact, more than fair. "Sale finalized this morning," Thomas added. "Funds are yours. The trust is funded. The title is clean." "It's done." Clara traced the raised seal with her finger, letting the truth settle into her bones. No more hearings, no more forged signatures, no more bargaining. Just the clean break of a legal blade. Marcia swung open the screen door, carrying a plastic bag of pastries. "I brought those Mexican wedding cookies you like. Figured we should celebrate your freedom properly." Rachel poured lemonade, humming faintly. Clara moved through the kitchen like she owned the air again. No more tension clinging to the walls. No more shadows trailing behind every footstep. Marcia plopped down at the table, smirking. "Did I hear that Lydia ran off to California?" "Santa Monica," Thomas confirmed. "Filed for separation the morning after eviction." "Well, bless her for making at least one smart decision," Marcia huffed. Clara chuckled, a soft, low sound that sounded new even to her. Rachel passed her the check and asked, "What are you going to do with it?" Clara folded the check and tucked it into the back of her ledger. "Live on my terms." She turned toward the fireplace, still warm from Evan's letter. "He wrote excuses," she said calmly. "I wrote Ash." And just as she turned back, her phone buzzed against the counter. She checked it, saw the number, and picked up. "Clara Jennings?" "Yes." "This is Diane from Crescent Title. I'm confirming receipt of funds. Final wire from the buyer is complete. Your proceeds are ready." Clara looked at Rachel, who watched her with wide, proud eyes. She smiled. "I'll come by this afternoon," Clara said, her voice steady. "It'll be good to hold it in my hands." The box cutter slid neatly through the final strip of tape. Clara peeled the cardboard flaps open, revealing a worn photo album resting atop her linens. She picked it up gently, the edges soft from decades of use. Her hands, older now but steady, traced the binding with quiet reverence. Sunlight spilled through the wide window of her new condo. Clean, quiet, 2 bedrooms, single story. The walls had a soft eggshell warmth, and the hardwood floors gleamed beneath her slippers. Outside, a saguaro cactus swayed in the dry breeze, its silhouette noble against the Arizona sky. Peace didn't have to announce itself. It arrived in stillness. "Third box of kitchen stuff," Rachel called, stepping inside with a dusty container. "And the mugs are bubble-wrapped like Fort Knox," Clara smiled. "You're hired again tomorrow." Rachel dropped the box with a light thud and stretched. "This place already feels like you." Clara moved slowly to a small table by the hallway and lifted a black frame from her tote. The deed, the real one. She placed it beside the photo album and straightened it with care. Her name shone in sharp serif letters. No one else's, not anymore. Marcia appeared an hour later, bursting through the door like a parade float in human form. She wore giant sunglasses and carried a bottle of champagne like it was a newborn. I brought Bubbles because you deserve to pop something besides your back for once. Clara laughed, genuinely. You're a menace. Thomas followed behind, dressed down in jeans and a golf polo. He nodded toward the walls. Already feels like a fresh start, Rachel grinned. She's even got the deed framed. I told her it's like her diploma in vengeance. Clara chuckled softly and turned to the group, her voice calm but fierce. He told me, you'll die here, not live here. So I sold the house from under his feet. Thomas lifted his glass. To your freedom. Marcia clinked hers. To revenge that lands like a symphony. Rachel's eyes glistened. To choosing peace over pain. They drank. The champagne was sharp and cold on the tongue, bubbles rising like victory. Clara stood in the center of it all, no longer a bystander in her own life. The house she left behind had been a battleground. This one was sanctuary. Later that night, after everyone had gone, Clara moved through the quiet condo, alone. She ran her fingers along the wall, testing its silence. There were no raised voices here, no slamming doors. Just the soft hum of the fridge and the occasional desert wind brushing the windows. She sat in her armchair, feet up, tea steeping nearby. On the table beside her, the framed deed caught the lamplight and glinted gold at the corners. Clara leaned back, let the warmth settle in her chest, and closed her eyes. The echo of Evan's voice, loud, demanding, venomous, belonged to a place she no longer lived. The old house was his prison now. His loss, not hers. Her eyes opened slowly. She whispered into the still room, to no one and everyone all at once. And I lived exactly where I chose,